I never thought I'd actually like farming. I had no idea when I came back that this would be the direction I went in. I actually used to work in banking in London. So it's as surprising to me as anyone else that I'm now running the farm in the way I am today. I've been back on the farm for 9 years, and in my blood is this want to bring nature back into the land. And taking a farm that was a very traditionally run unit and changing it into the mixed agroecological one you see now has been quite an exciting journey. We have to build nature back into our system of farming to change how production on a large scale is done across the UK and also globally as well. I'm George Young. I farm at Curtis Farm in Fobbing in South Essex. So my father's style of farming was very much kind of informed from when chemical farming was king. I can't blame my father for running the farm the way he did. And it's not just as simple as saying it's because we've got an older generation still farming, because there are actually lots of new generations of farmers coming in who are still carrying on older practices. So in the UK, there are about 23 million acres that are being farmed in around about 192,000 farms. If you look at industrial farming, large-scale farming, where there's a huge amount of big machinery, lots of agrochemicals used, lots of synthetic fertilizers used, I think ultimately they're not focused on building a sustainable farming system for the future. I'm not saying that they have to be dedicated to nature, but there has to be room for nature on those farms. We will not be addressing biodiversity loss unless we start farming agroecologically and really focusing on that with the way that we produce our food. We just need some simple solutions which every farmer can do to make sure that our farming system becomes more sustainable in the near future. So the farm here in Essex is a very mixed, diverse agroecological farm. We farm overall about 1,200 acres. We also have red poll cattle, which are a local native breed of cow that is really well adapted to this part of Essex. So very simply, I break the idea of agroecology down into three simple things. I call it farming with nature, circular farming, and food sovereignty. Farming with nature is the idea of trying to utilise nature as the toolkit on your farm rather than machinery or chemistry or anything like that. Then there's the idea of circular farming. The main benefits to circular farming are that you're not actually getting rid of any waste product. And then finally is the idea of food sovereignty. It's about saying, well, let's make sure that instead of people just getting fed, they understand where their food comes from, why their food has been grown in that way, and why it's important to have been grown in that way. So implementing agroecology on the farm is definitely not a simple thing. The biggest one in terms of initial impact was planting the agroforestry. Agroforestry is one of these relatively new ideas to farming in the UK. It kind of really drives nature into the middle of your fields. All the cool stuff happens on the edges of the field. What agroforestry does is absolutely maximise that edge effect. I've already planted 7,000 trees with cropping or grazing in between those belts of trees, and it has given my farm a huge amount more life. So you're essentially eliminating desertification, making it a much more beautiful and peaceful place to be. Also on the farm, crop diversity is something that I was really majoring on when I first started thinking differently about the way I was farming. So when I came back, we were growing wheat, oilseed rape, and peas. And now each of these fields have got at least 30 different species of plants growing in them, a huge amount of diversity happening on the ground, which obviously leads to a massive amount of additional biodiversity in the fields themselves. There's research going on at the moment, which is hopefully going to show that some of these lower yielding, more interesting diverse crops, if they're grown in a certain way, will actually end up having more micronutrition in the end product. If you look at how we used to eat 50 years ago and how we eat today, the last 50 years of agriculture have led to drastically increased yields. But those yields are essentially macronutritional, so they're calorific increases in yield. What that has meant is that the micronutritional content of the food that we eat is much, much lower. We're not getting the same level of nutrition in the food that we're eating. Feeding people is a much more complicated thing than just making sure we chuck calories into them. We're really focusing on nutritional produce rather than just the yield from that land. And I think this is a really key thing that as farmers and as food producers we've got to tackle. We should be really excited by the fact that actually food has an important voice in how people now think. We've gone from generations that knew nothing about their food whatsoever to one that cares. For someone coming new into farming now, we've got the ability to kind of look a little bit more in detail as to what we're doing on farms. Ironically, if we do end up focusing on biodiversity, many of the solutions also happen to fix quite a lot of the issues for climate change as well. I really think that agroecological farming has a massive part to play in ensuring that we've got a world still to live in the next 50 years.